You need to run." The words came in a harsh whisper from the tavern keeper's wife, her weathered hand gripping Lena's wrist hard enough to bruise. "They are here, the hunters. They are asking about girls without wolves. They are asking about you." Lena's blood turned to ice in her veins. Her hands, still wet from washing dishes in the filthy kitchen, began to tremble uncontrollably. She had known this day would come. She had always known. In a world where every werewolf could shift, could feel, their wolf stirring beneath their skin, could connect to the primal power that made their kind apex predators. Lena was nothing. Worse than nothing. She was an abomination. A werewolf born without a wolf. And the punishment for that crime was death. "How much time do I have?" Lena managed to whisper, though her throat felt like it was closing. The older woman's eyes, usually so hard and calculating, held something that might have been pity. "Minutes. Maybe less. They are in the main room now," showing a list of names to anyone who will look. "Your name is on that list, girl. I do not know how they found you, but they did." Lena did not waste time asking how or why. She had learned long ago that survival meant action, not questions. She pulled her wrist free, grabbed the thin cloak hanging by the kitchen door, and slipped out into the narrow alley behind the tavern. The night air bit at her skin, cold and merciless, carrying the scent of smoke and fear from the town square where the hunters had executed 3 defective wolves just 2 days ago. Lena had watched from the shadows, hidden among the crowd, as they dragged the accused forward. She had seen the terror in their eyes. She had heard their pleas fall on deaf ears. And she had understood with absolute clarity that the same fate awaited her if she was caught. Her feet moved before her mind fully processed where she was going. Through the maze of alleys she knew so well, past the houses where families slept safe in, their beds, their wolves purring contentedly in their souls, past the marketplace where she had stolen bread as a child, past the old temple where she had once prayed to the moon goddess for a miracle that never came. And then, as the shouts of hunters began to echo behind her, as torches lit up the darkness and dogs began to bark, Lena made a decision that was either brilliance or madness. She turned toward the hill, toward the massive stone fortress that loomed over the town like a sleeping beast, toward the one place in the entire kingdom where no hunter would dare to follow, the castle of Alpha King Darius Thornwood. Everyone knew the stories. Darius Thornwood was not just an Alpha King. He was a legend, whispered in fearful tones around fires at night. He had taken the throne at 19 after slaughtering every challenger who dared question his right to rule. His wolf was said to be twice the size of a normal lichen, with eyes that glowed like molten gold, and a howl that could be heard for miles. He showed no mercy to traitors, no compassion to the weak, and no interest in anything beyond expanding his power and territory. His castle was forbidden to all but the highest nobility and his personal guard. Intruders were killed on sight. No exceptions. No mercy. But as Lena ran through the forest that surrounded the castle grounds, her lungs burning and her legs screaming in protest, she realized that death by the Alpha King's hand was still preferable to death by the hunters. At least it would be quick. At least she would not have to endure the public humiliation, the mockery, the slow torture that the hunters inflicted on those they deemed unworthy of the gift of lycanthropy. The castle walls rose before her like a mountain of dark stone and iron. Torches burned in sconces along the battlements, and she could see guards patrolling the perimeter with military precision. There was no way she could scale those walls. No way she could fight her way past trained warriors. But Lena had spent her entire life finding ways into places she did not belong, and desperation made her bold. She circled the perimeter, staying low in the shadows, until she found what she was looking for. A drainage grate near the eastern wall, partially hidden by overgrown vines and moss. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her slender frame, and it stank of mold and decay. But it was her only chance. She squeezed through the iron bars, ignoring the way the metal scraped her skin, and dropped into the darkness below. The tunnels beneath the castle were even worse than she had imagined. Water dripped from the ceiling, creating puddles of stagnant filth on the stone floor. The air was thick and suffocating, carrying the scent of earth and something else. Something old and feral that made every instinct she had scream at her to turn back. But she could not turn back. Behind her lay certain death. Ahead lay only the possibility of death, and Lena had learned to take her chances where she could find them. She moved through the darkness, guided only by touch, her hands trailing along the damp stone walls, her feet testing each step before committing her weight. Time lost all meaning in that suffocating blackness. Minutes or hours could have passed. She had no way of knowing. All she knew was that eventually the tunnel began to slope upward, and faint light appeared ahead. The tunnel opened into what appeared to be an old storage chamber deep in the castle's lower levels. Wooden crates and barrels covered in dust filled the space, and a single torch burned in a wall sconce, casting dancing shadows across the vaulted ceiling. Lena emerged from the tunnel like a creature crawling from its burrow, filthy and exhausted and shaking with a combination of cold and fear. She had made it inside. Against all odds, she had actually made it inside the Alpha King's castle. Now she just had to stay hidden until the hunters left town. A day, maybe 2 at most. Then she could slip back out the way she came and disappear to another city, another life, another series of temporary hiding places, until the next time someone noticed the girl without a wolf. She found a corner behind several large crates, a space just wide enough for her to curl up and make herself as small as possible. The stone floor was freezing against her skin, but she wrapped her thin cloak around herself as best she could and tried to stop her teeth from chattering. Above her, she could hear the distant sounds of the castle, footsteps on stone, voices raised in conversation, music, faint and elegant, that suggested some kind of gathering or celebration was taking place in the halls above. The Alpha King was entertaining, which meant the castle would be filled with nobles and dignitaries, all too distracted by politics and wine to worry about what might be hiding in the forgotten storage chambers below. Lena closed her eyes and tried to convince herself that she was safe, that she had done the impossible and found sanctuary in the heart of danger itself, that maybe, just this once, fortune would smile on the girl who had nothing. She was wrong. The sound of footsteps on the stone stairs jerked her awake from a fitful half-sleep she had not realized she had fallen into. Heavy boots, multiple pairs, moving with the confident precision of trained warriors. Lena's heart began to pound so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. They had found her. Somehow, impossibly, they had found her. She pressed herself deeper into the corner, trying to become invisible, trying to will herself to simply cease existing. But the footsteps came closer, and then torchlight flooded the chamber, and rough hands grabbed her arms and yanked her from her hiding place with brutal efficiency. Well, well, what do we have here? The guard holding her right arm was massive, easily twice her size, with scars crisscrossing his face and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. An intruder. In the castle. On the night of the Alpha King's banquet. His companion, equally large and intimidating, shook his head slowly. You picked a bad night to try your luck, girl. The Alpha King is in a foul mood already. Lady Seraphina has been pressing him about the mating ceremony again, and you know how he gets when she pushes. He might just rip you apart himself for the entertainment value. Lena tried to speak, tried to explain, but no words came. Her throat had closed completely. Her voice, swallowed by pure terror. She had failed. She had run so far, fought so hard to survive, and it had all been for nothing. She was going to die in the dungeons of the Alpha King's castle, and no one would even know she had been there. No one would mourn her. No one would remember her name. The guards dragged her through the castle's lower levels, past cells that reeked of blood and despair, past chambers filled with instruments of torture that made her stomach turn. And then, to her confusion and mounting horror, they began to climb. Up stone staircases worn smooth by centuries of use, through corridors that grew progressively more elegant, more refined, past tapestries and paintings and suits of armor that gleamed in the torchlight. "Where are you taking me?" Lena finally managed to whisper, her voice cracking. The guard on her left laughed, a sound without humor. "To the throne room, girl. The Alpha King wants to see all intruders personally before they are executed. He likes to look them in the eyes, likes to see their fear. Consider it an honor. Most people never get within 100 yards of Darius Thornwood before they die." The throne room doors were massive slabs of dark wood bound with iron, carved with images of wolves in various stages of the hunt. The guards pushed them open without ceremony, and suddenly Lena was being dragged into a space so vast and magnificent, it stole what little breath she had left. The throne room was filled with people, nobles in silk and velvet, their wolves practically radiating from their auras in waves of power that made Lena feel even more insignificant than usual. Ladies with jewels dripping from their throats and wrists, lords with swords at their hips, and expressions of bored superiority. And at the far end of the chamber, seated on a throne of black stone that seemed to absorb the light around it, was the Alpha King himself. Darius Thornwood was everything the legend said, and more. Tall, easily 6.5 feet of pure muscle and predatory grace. Dark hair that fell to his shoulders, framing a face that was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful. Dangerous, overwhelming, impossible to look away from. But it was his eyes that made Lena's breath catch in her throat. Gold. Pure, molten gold. Glowing with an inner light that spoke of a wolf so powerful it could barely be contained by human flesh. Those eyes locked onto her the moment she was dragged into the room, and Lena felt the impact of that gaze, like a physical blow. The entire room fell silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Music ceased. Every single person in that throne room turned to look at the filthy, trembling girl being held between two guards. And Lena wished with every fiber of her being that the floor would simply open up and swallow her whole. "My king." The guard on her right bowed his head respectfully, though he did not release his grip on her arm. "We found this intruder in the lower storage chambers. She gained entry through the old drainage tunnels on the eastern wall. We await your judgment." Darius Thornwood said nothing. He simply stared at Lena with those impossible gold eyes, his expression unreadable. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The silence in the room became suffocating, pressing down on Lena's chest, until she thought her ribs might crack from the pressure. And then, from beside the throne, a woman rose gracefully to her feet. Lady Seraphina. Even through her terror, Lena recognized her. Everyone in the kingdom knew Lady Seraphina Blackmore. Daughter of the most powerful noble family in the realm, she was breathtakingly beautiful, with hair like spun silver and eyes like ice chips. She was also, according to every rumor and gossip column, the Alpha King's intended mate. Their union had been arranged by the Council of Alphas to unite the two most powerful bloodlines in werewolf society. The announcement of their official mating ceremony was expected any day. An intruder? Seraphina's voice was silk and poison combined, smooth and deadly. She glided down from the dais with the grace of a predator stalking wounded prey, her gown of midnight blue trailing behind her like liquid shadow. On tonight of all nights? How very bold. She circled Lena slowly, looking her up and down with obvious disgust. Or perhaps just very stupid. "Look at her, my king. Filthy, malnourished. And I do not sense a wolf. Not even a whisper of one." The last words were delivered with such contempt that several nobles in the audience actually gasped. To be without a wolf was the greatest shame a werewolf could bear. It marked you as defective, broken, unworthy of life itself. Is it true, girl? Serafina stopped directly in front of Lena, so close that Lena could smell her perfume, expensive and cloying. Are you one of those pathetic creatures born without the gift of the moon goddess? Is that why you are here, hiding in our castle like a rat in the walls? Lena wanted to defend herself, wanted to explain about the hunters, about running for her life, about having nowhere else to go. But when she opened her mouth, only a choked sob emerged. Tears she had been holding back since the tavern keeper's wife grabbed her wrist, finally spilled down her cheeks, hot and shameful. She was going to die. Here, now, in front of all these beautiful, powerful people who looked at her like she was nothing, like she was less than nothing. Please. The word came out as barely a whisper. But in the absolute silence of the throne room, it carried. Please, I did not mean any harm. I was just trying to survive. The hunters, they were coming for me. I just needed somewhere to hide. Just for one night. Please. Serafina laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, how precious. She thinks begging will save her. My king, shall I have the guards take her to the dungeons? Or perhaps we should make an example of her right here. Show everyone what happens to those who dare violate your sanctuary. But before Darius could respond, before anyone could move, something shifted in the air. A change so subtle that only those with the most powerful senses would notice. But Lena felt it. A pull. A tug deep in her chest, in a place she had never known existed. And when she looked up through her tears, she found the Alpha King's gold eyes still locked on her face with an intensity that made her skin burn. And then Darius Thornwood spoke for the first time since she had been dragged into his throne room. His voice was deep, resonant, with a note of command that made every wolf in the room instinctively bow their heads in submission. Every wolf except Lena, who had no wolf to respond to that primal call to obey. Release her. The guards holding her arms jerked in surprise but did not immediately comply. The one on her right actually dared to question. My king? But she is an intruder. Protocol demands, I said release her. This time the command carried the weight of the Alpha. King's full power, and the guards had no choice but to obey. They dropped her arms so suddenly that Lena stumbled, barely catching herself before she fell to her knees on the polished marble floor. Serafina's perfectly beautiful face twisted with confusion, and something that might have been the first stirrings of anger. Darius, what are you doing? This creature broke into your castle. She violated the sanctity of your home. She needs to be punished. But Darius was no longer looking at Serafina. He rose from his throne with fluid grace, descending the dais steps one at a time, his eyes never leaving Lena's face. The crowd parted before him like water, nobles and warriors alike, creating a clear path between the Alpha King and the trembling girl who did not understand what was happening. When he reached her, he stopped just inches away, so close that Lena could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the way his chest rose and fell with each controlled breath. He was so much taller than her that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, and the full force of his presence this close was almost overwhelming. What is your name? The question was asked softly, almost gently, so at odds with everything Lena had heard about the brutal Alpha King, that for a moment she thought she had misheard. Lena, she managed to stammer. Just Lena. I do not have a family name. I do not have anything. Something flickered in those gold eyes. Recognition? Satisfaction? Lena could not be sure. Lena, Darius repeated, as if testing how her name felt in his mouth. And then he said something that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Something that caused the entire throne room to erupt in shocked whispers and gasps. You finally came home. If you are enjoying this story, Do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Lena stared at the Alpha King, certain she had misunderstood. What? The word came out as barely a breath. I do not understand. Darius reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch away if she chose, and brushed a strand of filthy hair back from her face with surprising gentleness. His fingers were warm against her cold skin, and the touch sent a jolt of something electric racing down her spine. You do not need to understand yet, but you are safe now. No one will harm you. No one will touch you. I give you my word as Alpha King and as... He paused, his jaw tightening as if he was stopping himself from saying something too revealing. As your protector. Seraphina's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Darius, have you lost your mind? This girl is nothing. She has no wolf, no family, no value whatsoever. And you stand there making declarations of protection as if she were royalty? The Alpha King's head turned toward Seraphina with glacial slowness, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. Be very careful with your next words. Seraphina, I have allowed your family's influence to grant you certain liberties, but there are limits to my patience. The lady's face paled slightly, but her pride would not let her back down completely. Our betrothal was approved by the council. We are to be mated within the month. What will they think when they hear you are defending some wolfless nobody who crawled out of the sewers? The council does not dictate my choices. Darius's words were final, absolute. And our arrangement is political necessity, nothing more. You know this as well as I do. He turned back to Lena, and his expression softened fractionally. You are exhausted. You need food, rest, and clean clothes. Marcus. One of the guards who had dragged her in stepped forward immediately, bowing low. Yes, my king? Prepare the East Wing guest chambers, the ones overlooking the rose garden. Ensure Lena has everything she needs, food, clothing, whatever she requires. And Marcus? Yes, my king? If anyone, and I mean anyone, attempts to harm her or remove her from this castle, they answer to me personally. Am I understood? Marcus's eyes widened, but he nodded sharply. Perfectly understood, my king. The murmurs in the throne room grew louder, speculation and confusion rippling through the assembled nobles like wind through grass. Lena could see the questions on every face. Why would the Alpha King offer such protection to a nobody? What was so special about this filthy, wolfless girl? And most importantly, what did this mean for the long-planned mating between Darius and Seraphina? Lena wanted to ask the same questions, but her voice had abandoned her again. She could only stare at the man who had just defied his entire court to offer sanctuary to someone who should have been executed on sight. Darius must have seen the confusion and fear and desperate hope warring in her expression, because he leaned down slightly, bringing his face closer to hers, and spoke in a voice meant only for her ears. I know you do not understand. I know you are frightened. But I promise you, Lena, you were never just hiding. You have always belonged here. You have always been mine. The words should have terrified her. They should have sent her running for the nearest exit. Castle walls and hunters be damned. But instead, that strange pull in her chest intensified, becoming almost painful in its insistence. And for the first time in her entire miserable life, Lena felt something she had never dared to feel before. She felt wanted. The guest chambers Marcus led her to were beyond anything Lena had ever imagined. The rooms were larger than every place she had ever lived combined, with soaring ceilings, massive windows draped in velvet, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a palace. Which, she supposed with slightly hysterical amusement, it did. A team of servants appeared within minutes, filling a copper tub with steaming water, laying out clothes in soft fabrics that felt like clouds against her work-roughened hands, setting out trays of food that made her empty stomach cramp with sudden desperate hunger. The servants were professional and efficient, but Lena could see the curiosity in their eyes. Who was this girl that the Alpha King himself had commanded they serve? Why was she being given chambers reserved for visiting royalty? The questions hung unspoken in the air, but no one dared voice them. When they finally left her alone, Lena stood in the center of the enormous bedroom and tried to process what had just happened. She had broken into the Alpha King's castle expecting to hide in shadows for a night and then disappear. Instead, she had been dragged before the most powerful werewolf in the kingdom, sentenced to certain death, and then inexplicably saved and installed in luxury she could never have dreamed of. It made no sense. None of it made any sense. Unless the Alpha King was playing some cruel game. Unless he planned to build her up only to destroy her more thoroughly later. Unless this was all some elaborate form of torture that she simply did not understand yet. But the way he had looked at her, the gentleness in his touch when he brushed her hair back, the absolute authority in his voice when he declared she would be protected, that had not felt like cruelty. That had felt like something else entirely, something Lena did not have a name for. She sank into the bath and let the hot water ease the aches from her body, washing away layers of dirt and fear and exhaustion. She ate until her stomach hurt, tasting flavors she had never experienced, foods she had only seen through tavern windows when she was too poor and too desperate to do anything but watch others enjoy what she could never have. And then, when she could no longer keep her eyes open, she collapsed into the enormous bed with its silk sheets and down pillows and slept more deeply than she had in years. She dreamed of gold eyes and moonlight and a voice calling her home. The next 3 days passed in a strange, dreamlike haze. Lena remained in her chambers mostly, too afraid to venture out into the castle proper where she knew she would face the hostility of nobles who saw her as an intruder and an aberration. Servants brought her meals and clean clothes and asked politely if she needed anything. But beneath their professional courtesy, Lena could sense their confusion, their doubt, their certainty that the Alpha King's protection of her would not last, and when it ended, she would be cast out or worse. Serafina visited on the second day. She swept into Lena's chambers without knocking, her silver hair perfectly arranged, her gown of emerald silk making Lena feel like a child playing dress-up in the simple clothes the servants had provided. "So," Serafina said without preamble, her ice-chip eyes raking over Lena with obvious disdain. "You are the little mystery that has the entire castle gossiping. Tell me, how did you do it?" Lena, who had been sitting by the window watching the gardens below, rose slowly to her feet. "I do not know what you mean." "Oh, do not play innocent with me." Serafina's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Somehow you have managed to capture the Alpha King's attention. Somehow you have convinced him to defy protocol and common sense by granting you sanctuary. I want to know your secret. What spell did you use? What trick? Because there must be one. A wolfless nobody does not simply stumble into a king's favor by accident." The accusation stung more than it should have. "I did not do anything," Lena said quietly. "I was running from hunters. I needed a place to hide. That is all. I do not understand why the Alpha King chose to protect me any more than you do." Serafina studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. The contempt was still there, but beneath it Lena could now see something else. Fear. He has never looked at me the way he looked at you in that throne room, Serafina said, and for the first time her voice held a note of genuine emotion beneath the cultivated coldness. "We have been betrothed for 2 years. 2 years of political negotiations and council meetings and carefully orchestrated public appearances. And in all that time, he has never once looked at me with anything approaching real interest. But you walk into his throne room covered in filth from his sewers, and he looks at you like—" She cut herself off, her jaw tightening. "Like you are the answer to a question he has been asking his entire life." Lena did not know what to say to that. She could not defend against an accusation that was not entirely unfair. She had seen the way Darius looked at her. She had felt the weight of that gaze, the intensity of it, and she had absolutely no explanation for why. "I am sorry," Lena finally said, meaning it. "I never wanted to cause problems. If you want me to leave, if you think my presence here is damaging to you, I can go. I can slip away tonight and— No!" Serafina's voice was sharp. "You cannot leave. Do you know why? Because Darius gave you his protection, his word as Alpha King. If you disappeared now, every pack in the kingdom would question his authority. They would wonder if he was incapable of keeping his promises. You staying here is a political disaster. You leaving would be even worse." She moved closer, and Lena had to fight the urge to back away. "So we are trapped together, you and I. You, the mysterious girl with no wolf and no explanation. And me, the mate who was chosen for bloodlines and alliances instead of any real connection. Tell me, do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" Before Lena could answer, a knock sounded at the door. Both women turned as Marcus entered, bowing respectfully. "Lady Serafina, the Alpha King has requested your presence in the war room, immediately." Serafina's expression smoothed into practiced neutrality. "Of course. Tell him I will be there shortly." But before she left, she paused at the door and looked back at Lena one more time. "Whatever is happening here, whatever game Darius is playing or destiny is unfolding, understand this. I will not give up what is rightfully mine without a fight. The council approved our union. The realm expects our mating. And I have spent my entire life preparing to be his queen. I will not be replaced by a gutter snipe who does not even have a wolf." After Serafina left, Lena sank back onto the window seat and wrapped her arms around herself. The lady's words echoed in her mind, mixing with her own doubts and confusion. What was happening here? Why had Darius protected her? And what did he mean when he said she had always been his? That night, sleep was impossible. Lena paced her chambers like a caged animal, her mind spinning with questions that had no answers. Finally, as moonlight streamed through the windows and the castle grew quiet around her, she made a decision. She needed answers. And there was only one person who could provide them. She slipped from her chambers and into the hallway beyond, moving with the silence and stealth that years of survival had taught her. The castle at night was a different place entirely. Shadows pooled in corners and doorways. Torches cast dancing light across stone walls. And somewhere in the distance, Lena could hear the howls of wolves running in the forest beyond the castle grounds, their voices raised in songs that spoke of freedom and power and belonging. She did not have a clear destination in mind. She simply followed her instincts, letting that strange pull in her chest guide her through corridors and down staircases, until she found herself in a part of the castle she had never seen before. The hallways here were wider, the doors larger, and the air itself seemed to hum with contained power. She was in the private wing, the Alpha King's personal chambers. Lena should have turned back. Every logical part of her brain screamed that she was making a terrible mistake, that wandering into the Alpha King's private territory uninvited was potentially suicidal. But that pull in her chest was stronger than logic, stronger than fear. It drew her forward like a moth to flame, irresistible and undeniable. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. She found him on a balcony overlooking the forest. He stood with his back to her, his hands braced on the stone railing, his dark hair stirring in the night breeze. Even from behind, even in the moonlight, he was magnificent, powerful and dangerous, and utterly alone in a way that made Lena's heart ache for reasons she could not name. "You should not be here." His voice carried clearly despite the wind, and Lena realized he had known she was there from the moment she stepped onto the balcony. Perhaps even before that. "I know," she admitted, moving closer despite every instinct telling her to flee. "But I needed to talk to you. I needed to understand why you are doing this, why you protected me, why you said those things in the throne room." Darius was silent for so long that Lena thought he might not answer. But finally, he turned to face her, and in the moonlight, his gold eyes seemed to glow with their own inner fire. "Do you know what a true mate is, Lena?" The question caught her off guard. "I have heard stories, tales the old women used to tell in the villages, about wolves who are destined for each other, souls that recognize each other across lifetimes. Those tales are not just stories," Darius said quietly. "True mates are real. They are rare, perhaps 1 in a million, but they are real. When true mates meet, there is a connection that transcends logic or reason or choice. The wolves recognize each other instantly. The bond forms whether the people involved want it to or not. And once formed, it cannot be broken. Not by distance, not by time, not by death itself." Lena's breath caught in her throat. "But I do not have a wolf. I have never had a wolf. How could I possibly be anyone's mate?" Something painful crossed Darius's face. "That is the question I have been asking myself for 3 days. Because the moment you were dragged into my throne room, the moment I looked into your eyes, my wolf recognized you. He knew you. He claimed you. And every instinct I have, every fiber of my being, screams that you are mine, my true mate, the one I have been searching for my entire life realizing I was searching." He took a step closer, and Lena could see the tension in his body, the barely restrained power coiled beneath his skin. "But you are right. You do not have a wolf. I cannot sense one, and that should make this connection impossible. True mate bonds only exist between wolves and their counterparts. So either my wolf is wrong, which has never happened in the entire history of our kind, or what?" Lena whispered. "Or you did have a wolf once, and something happened to it. Something that sealed it away so deeply that even you do not remember it exists." The words hit Lena like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, shaking her head in denial. "No, that is not possible. I have never felt a wolf, never heard one. If I had one, I would know. I would feel it." "Not necessarily," Darius said. "There are old magics, ancient spells that can seal a wolf away completely. Usually it is done to protect children. If a bloodline is being hunted, if there are enemies who would kill a child for their heritage, sometimes parents will seal their child's wolf to hide them, to make them appear human or wolfless, so they will be overlooked, ignored, allowed to survive." Lena's mind reeled. Could it be true? Could there really be a wolf inside her, locked away and hidden for her entire life? And if so, why? Who would have done that to her? And what kind of bloodline would be dangerous enough to require such drastic protection? "I see your mind working," Darius said, a faint smile touching his lips. "I see the questions forming. I have many of the same questions. But Lena, I need you to understand something. Whether your wolf is sealed or truly gone, whether you are noble-born or common as dirt, whether this bond makes any logical sense or defies everything we know about our kind, none of that changes the fundamental truth. You are my mate, and I will protect you with everything I have, everything I am, for as long as I breathe." The intensity of his declaration should have frightened her. Instead, Lena found herself taking a step toward him, drawn by that inexplicable pull that had been growing stronger every day since she stumbled into his throne room. "What about Serafina? What about the council? Everyone expects you to mate with her. Your kingdom needs that alliance." "My kingdom needs a strong ruler," Darius corrected. "And I have never been stronger than I am when I am near you. The Blackmore Alliance provides political advantages? Yes. But political advantages mean nothing if I spend the rest of my life mated to the wrong woman, while my true mate exists somewhere in the world." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. his touch achingly gentle despite the calluses on his palms. "I know you are afraid. I know you do not understand what is happening between us. But I need you to trust me. Will you do that, Lena? Will you trust me long enough to find the truth about who you really are?" Lena looked into those gold eyes and saw her entire future hanging in the balance. She could refuse. She could walk away, leave the castle, return to her life of hiding and running and barely surviving. It would be safer, simpler. It would not upend an entire kingdom or challenge political alliances or risk the wrath of powerful nobles. But for the first time in her life, Lena did not want to choose safety. She wanted to choose the truth, whatever that truth might be. "Yes," she whispered. "I trust you." Darius's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. And when he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead in a gesture that was both reverent and possessive, Lena felt that pull in her chest explode into something bigger, brighter, more terrifying and exhilarating than anything she had ever experienced. She felt, for just a moment, like she was exactly where she was always meant to be. The next morning, Darius summoned the castle's senior scholar, an ancient wolf named Helena, who had served the Thornwood family for 3 generations. Helena was small and bent with age, but her eyes were sharp and her mind sharper, and she listened without interruption as Darius explained the situation. When he finished, she looked at Lena with an expression that might have been pity. "If what you suspect is true, if the girl's wolf has been sealed by ancient magic, then breaking that seal will not be simple or safe. Such spells are designed to be permanent. They are meant to protect. Yes, but also to completely suppress the wolf's existence. Breaking them prematurely, before the individual is ready, can be catastrophic. The wolf could emerge wild and uncontrolled. It could destroy the host's mind, or it could simply fail to emerge at all, leaving the person trapped between 2 states of being." Lena felt cold dread pooling in her stomach. "Then maybe we should not try. Maybe we should just leave things as they are." But Helena shook her head. "If you are truly the alpha, King's mate, leaving the seal in place is not an option. The mate bond will continue to strengthen whether you want it to or not. And eventually, the pressure of that bond trying to complete itself while your wolf remains sealed will tear you apart from the inside. No, if there is a sealed wolf inside you, we must find it and release it. The only question is how." She turned to the massive bookshelf that lined one wall of her study and began pulling down ancient tomes, their leather covers cracked with age and their pages yellowed with time. "The old magics are not widely practiced anymore, but the knowledge still exists. Give me 3 days. I will research every text, every scroll, every whispered legend in this castle's archives. If there is a way to safely release a sealed wolf, I will find it." Those 3 days were the longest of Lena's life. She spent them wandering the castle, growing familiar with its corridors and courtyards, trying to ignore the whispers that followed her everywhere she went. The servants had started calling her the Alpha King's guest, with a careful neutrality that suggested they had been specifically instructed not to gossip. But Lena could see the questions in their eyes, the speculation, the doubt, and she knew that Serafina was not sitting idle. The lady appeared at every meal, every court gathering, always impeccably dressed and perfectly composed, playing the role of dutiful almost mate with practiced grace. She smiled at Darius with just the right amount of affection. She deferred to him with just the right amount of respect. And she ignored Lena with a completeness that was somehow more cutting than outright hostility. But Lena could see the cracks forming. The way Serafina's smile never quite reached her eyes. The way her hands clenched when she thought no one was watching. The way she looked at Darius when he was not paying attention, with an expression that mixed longing and anger and bitter resignation. On the 3rd evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Helena summoned them both to her study. The old scholar looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and too much reading in dim light. But there was triumph in her expression. "I found it," she said without preamble. "The ritual of awakening. It is old magic, older than this kingdom, older than the recorded history of our kind, and it is dangerous. But it should work." Darius leaned forward intently. "Explain." Helena spread a fragile parchment across her desk, its surface covered in symbols and diagrams that meant nothing to Lena, but clearly made sense to the scholar. The ritual requires 3 elements. First, the blood of the sealed wolf's true mate, to call to the hidden wolf through the mate bond. Second, moonlight from the full moon, to invoke the blessing of the moon goddess herself. And third, a catalyst. Something that will shock the sealed wolf into emerging. Something so powerful and primal that even ancient magic cannot keep it suppressed. "What kind of catalyst?" Lena asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Helena's expression was grave. "Life-threatening danger. The sealed wolf must believe that its human host is about to die. It must feel such desperation, such primal fear, that it has no choice but to break through whatever magical barriers are holding it captive. In other words, you will need to be put into a situation where your life is genuinely at risk, where every instinct you have screams that death is imminent." Lena's blood turned to ice. "You want to almost kill me to see if I have a wolf? That is your solution?" "Not almost," Helena corrected quietly. "The danger must be real. Your wolf will know if the threat is false. If you hold back even slightly, if any part of you knows you are safe, the seal will not break. You must truly believe you are about to die." Darius slammed his hand down on the desk with such force that the wood cracked. "Absolutely not. I will not risk her life on a theory. There has to be another way." "There is not," Helena said, meeting his fury with calm certainty. "I have read every text, consulted every source. This is the only ritual that can break a seal this powerful. And it must be done on the next full moon, 3 days from now. Because the longer the mate bond strengthens while the wolf remains sealed, the more dangerous the situation becomes for both of you. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on." Darius turned away, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Lena could see the tension in every line of his body, could practically feel the war raging inside him. His wolf wanted its mate, but his human side recoiled at the thought of deliberately putting her in mortal danger. Finally, Lena broke the silence. "I will do it." Both Darius and Helena turned to stare at her. "Lena, no," Darius said immediately. "You do not understand what you are agreeing to. The danger is real. You could die." "I could die anyway," Lena countered, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Helena said the pressure of the bond would eventually destroy me if my wolf stays sealed. So really, I am choosing between dying slowly and painfully, or taking a chance at survival. When you put it that way, the choice is simple." Darius crossed to her in 2 long strides and gripped her shoulders. "This is not a game, Lena. This is not some romantic story where everything works out perfectly in the end. If we do this ritual and it fails, you will die. And I will have to live with the knowledge that I killed my own mate because I was too impatient to find another solution." "Is there another solution?" Lena asked, holding his gaze. "Truly? One that does not leave me trapped forever between what I am and what I might be?" Darius opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly struggling. Finally he admitted, "No, there is not." "Then we do the ritual," Lena said with finality. "In 3 days, on the full moon. And whatever happens, at least we will know the truth." The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Helena gathered the necessary components for the ritual, carefully selecting the location where it would take place. "Not in the castle," she explained, "but in the ancient stone circle deep in the forest, where the old magic was strongest and the moon goddess's presence could be most clearly felt." Darius spent hours with his military commanders, ostensibly discussing border patrols and trade negotiations. But Lena knew he was actually preparing for the worst. If something went wrong during the ritual, if she died, he would need his affairs in order. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt strangely calm, as if some part of her had always known this moment was coming. Serafina appeared in Lena's chambers the night before the full moon. She looked different. Her hair was down, falling in silver waves around her shoulders instead of being perfectly styled. Her dress was simple, and her eyes, usually so cold and controlled, held a complex mix of emotions that Lena could not fully read. "I heard about the ritual," Serafina said without preamble. "The entire castle has heard. There are wagers being placed on whether you will survive or die screaming." Lena flinched at the bluntness, but she did not look away. "I assume you are hoping for the latter." To her surprise, Serafina laughed bitterly. "You would think so, would you not? The competition eliminated, the threat removed, my path to becoming queen secured. But the truth is more complicated than that." She moved to the window and stared out at the forest beyond. "I have spent my entire life being groomed for one purpose: to become the Alpha King's mate, to unite our bloodlines, to be the perfect political partner. And I am good at it. I know how to smile at the right people, say the right things, play the games that need to be played to maintain power." "But," Lena prompted softly. "But I have never loved him," Serafina admitted, and the words seemed to cost her something. "And he has never loved me. We would have been an effective partnership, yes. We would have ruled well together, but there would have been no passion, no real connection, no mate bond binding us together. Just duty and obligation and carefully negotiated compromises." She turned back to Lena, and her expression was raw in a way Lena had never seen before. "When he looks at you, there is something in his eyes that has never been there when he looks at me. And as much as I hate you for it, as much as I resent your very existence, I cannot help but wonder what it must feel like to be loved like that, to be someone's true mate instead of their political necessity." Lena did not know what to say. She had expected anger, threats, warnings, not this painful honesty. "I am sorry," she finally offered. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never asked for any of this." "I know," Serafina said, "which somehow makes it worse. At least if you were scheming and manipulative, I could hate you cleanly. But you are just a girl who was running for her life and stumbled into a destiny you do not even understand." She moved toward the door, then paused. "I hope you survive tomorrow, Lena. Not because I want you to have him, but because he deserves to have what I never could give him. He deserves real love, not just political convenience. And if that means I lose everything I have worked for my entire life, then perhaps I never deserved it in the first place." The full moon rose huge and silver over the forest, casting everything in shades of blue and white. Lena stood in the center of the ancient stone circle, wearing a simple white dress that Helena had provided, her feet bare on the cold ground. Around her, the stones loomed like silent sentinels, carved with symbols that predated any living memory. Darius stood at the circle's edge, his face drawn and tense. Helena was beside him, holding a silver chalice and murmuring prayers in a language Lena did not recognize. "It is time," the old scholar said, her voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "Lena, you must stand in the center. Do not move from that spot no matter what happens. The circle will protect you from most harm. But if you step outside its bounds before the ritual is complete, the magic will collapse, and the attempt will fail." Lena nodded, her mouth too dry for words. Darius approached slowly, his gold eyes reflecting the moonlight. When he reached her, he cupped her face in his hands one more time. "If this goes wrong," he said quietly, "if the worst happens, I need you to know that finding you, even for this brief time, has been worth everything. You have given me something I never thought I would have. Hope. Do not talk like that, Lena whispered, her eyes burning with unshed tears. I am going to survive. I am going to see what happens
I promise.
next. Darius kissed her then, a kiss that was gentle and fierce and desperate all at once, and when he pulled back, Lena could taste salt on her lips, and did not know if the tears were his or hers. Helena stepped forward and made a small cut on Darius's palm with a silver blade. Blood welled up, dark and rich, and she collected it in the chalice. Then she approached Lena and poured the blood in a circle around her feet, chanting continuously in that ancient tongue. The moment the blood circle closed, Lena felt something shift. The air grew heavier. The moonlight seemed to intensify until it was almost painful to look at. And that pull in her chest, the one that had been growing steadily stronger since she first met Darius, suddenly became an inferno. Now comes the hard part, Helena said, stepping back. The catalyst, the mortal threat. Darius, you know what you must do. Darius's face was anguished, but he nodded. He stepped back from the circle and called out into the forest in a voice that echoed off the trees. Come forth! For a moment, nothing happened. Then the forest erupted with movement. Wolves poured from between the trees, dozens of them, their eyes glowing in the moonlight and their teeth bared in snarls. They were rogues, Helena had explained earlier. Wolves without packs, driven mad by isolation and bloodlust. Normally, they would never dare approach an Alpha King's territory. But Darius had specifically ordered his border guards to capture several and bring them here for this purpose. They had been starved, goaded, made wild and vicious and uncontrollable. And now they surrounded the stone circle, pacing and snapping and radiating murderous intent. Lena's heart began to pound so hard, she thought it might burst from her chest. This was real. These wolves would kill her if they could reach her. And the only thing protecting her was a circle of blood and ancient magic that she had to trust would hold. Break the outer barrier, Helena commanded. Darius raised his hand, and immediately the magical dome that had been keeping the rogues at a safe distance collapsed. The wolves surged forward with savage howls, their claws tearing at the ground as they raced toward Lena. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to escape, to do anything except stand still and wait for death to arrive. But she held her position, her entire body shaking with terror as the rogues hit the blood circle. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The invisible barrier held, keeping the rogues inches from Lena's skin even as they snapped and clawed at the air. But then Helena began chanting again, and Lena felt the barrier weakening. Deliberately, systematically, allowing the rogues to push closer inch by inch. No, Darius growled, his voice breaking. This is too dangerous. End it now. We cannot, Helena said, though her own voice trembled. The seal will not break unless she truly believes she is about to die. Trust. The ritual, my king. Trust the old magic. The barrier thinned further. The rogues were so close now that Lena could smell their rancid breath, could see the madness in their eyes, could feel their claws brushing against her arms. One more push, and they would break through completely. One more moment, and she would be torn apart. And that was when it happened. Deep inside Lena, in a place she had never known existed, something woke up. It started as a whisper, so faint she almost missed it. Then, it grew into a voice clear and strong and absolutely furious. How dare they threaten us? How dare they come so close to our mate? How dare they make us feel this fear? The voice was not her own, but it was not separate from her either. It was part of her. It had always been part of her. Her wolf. Lena gasped as power exploded through her body, a sensation so intense it was almost agonizing. Her bones began to shift, her skin began to burn, and for the first time in her entire life, She felt her wolf rising to the surface, shattering the magical chains that had held it captive for so long. The transformation was not smooth or graceful. It was violent and chaotic and painful beyond anything Lena had imagined. But when it finally completed, when she finally stood on 4 legs instead of 2 with her wolf fully emerged and present and gloriously alive, the rogues actually backed away. Because Lena's wolf was not ordinary. It was massive, nearly the size of an alpha's wolf, with fur that shimmered silver-white in the moonlight. And its eyes, when they opened, glowed with the exact same shade of gold as Darius's. The rogues, recognizing power far beyond their own, turned and fled back into the forest, their howls of terror echoing through the night. Lena stood in the center of the stone circle, her new senses overwhelmed by the intensity of everything. She could hear Darius's heartbeat from 20 feet away. She could smell every flower in the forest, every drop of dew on the grass. And she could feel the mate bond, no longer a vague pull, but a golden thread connecting her soul to his, bright and unbreakable, and absolutely right. Darius approached slowly, his own wolf rising in his eyes as he recognized what stood before him. Not a weak, wolfless girl who needed protection, but a she-wolf of incredible power and beauty who was every bit his equal. He shifted then, his transformation smooth and practiced, and his wolf was everything the legends said, massive and dark-furred and magnificent. The 2 wolves circled each other in the moonlight, and Lena felt her wolf singing with joy at finally meeting its mate properly. When they touched, nose to nose in the ancient gesture of recognition and acceptance, the mate bond snapped into place with such force that both of them stumbled, and Lena knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever separate them again. Helena watched from beyond the circle, tears streaming down her weathered face. "The bloodline of the silver moon," she whispered in awe. "I never thought I would see it in my lifetime. But there is no mistaking that wolf, that power. Lena, do you understand what you are?" But Lena, still in wolf form, could not answer. She was too overwhelmed, too consumed by the rightness of existing in her true form at last. It was Darius who shifted back first, his human form reappearing as he knelt beside Lena's wolf and stroked her silver fur with reverent hands. "Change back," he said, softly. "I know it is hard the first time, but I will guide you. Focus on your human shape. Remember who you were. Let the wolf recede but not disappear. You are both now, always both." It took several tries, and the process was almost as painful as the initial transformation had been. But finally, Lena found herself human again, kneeling naked on the cold ground, with Darius's arms wrapped around her and his warmth seeping into her chilled skin. "I have a wolf," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "I really have a wolf. All this time, all these years, and it was there. It was always there." "Yes," Darius said, pressing his face into her hair. "And she is magnificent. You are magnificent." Helena approached with a blanket that she draped around Lena's shoulders. "We need to return to the castle. You need rest, food, and time to adjust to your new reality. But first, you need to understand what you have just become. The Silver Moon bloodline has not been seen in this kingdom for over a century. They were the royal family before the Thornwoods. They ruled with wisdom and power, and their wolves were legendary for their size and their distinctive coloring. But 100 years ago they were betrayed, slaughtered by ambitious nobles who wanted to seize power for themselves. The entire bloodline was believed to have been wiped out. Lena stared at the old scholar, trying to process what she was hearing. "You are saying I am descended from royalty? That I have royal blood?" "Not just descended from," Helena corrected gently. "If the legends are true, if the bloodline magic works the way the old texts describe, then you are the Silver Moon heir, the last of your line. And by ancient law, That makes you a queen in your own right." The words hung in the air like thunder. Lena looked at Darius, saw the same shock and understanding dawning in his expression. "That is why your wolf was sealed," he said slowly. "Someone knew what you were. Someone knew that if you awakened your wolf, if you claimed your heritage, it would challenge the entire political structure of the kingdom. So they hid you. They sealed your wolf and likely erased your memories, then left you in obscurity, where no one would ever think to look for a lost queen." "But who?" Lena asked. "Who would do that? My parents? Did they know what I was?" Helena shook her head. "Those answers will take time to uncover. But for now, we need to return to the castle and decide what comes next. Because once word spreads that the Silver Moon heir has returned, that she is alive and her wolf has awakened, every power structure in this kingdom will be challenged. Some will welcome you, others will see you as a threat, and still others will try to use you as a pawn in their own games for power." Darius helped Lena to her feet, his arm steady around her waist. "She will be no one's pawn," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "She is my mate, and she is under my protection. Anyone who tries to harm her will have to go through me first." The return to the castle was surreal. Lena walked through the same corridors she had crept through just days ago as a frightened, wolfless fugitive. But now, everything was different. She could sense the wolves of every person they passed, could feel their power levels, their emotional states, their immediate reactions to her presence. And she could feel Darius beside her, his own wolf purring contentedly through the mate bond now that they were finally properly connected. When they reached the throne room, they found it already filled with nobles who had been summoned by urgent messengers. Word had clearly spread fast. Lena could see shock, confusion, and calculation on various faces as they took in the sight of the wolfless girl, now clearly radiating the unmistakable aura of a powerful she-wolf. Seraphina stood near the throne, her expression carefully neutral. But when her eyes met Lena's, something passed between them. Not friendship exactly, but perhaps understanding. Perhaps acceptance that the world had shifted in ways neither of them had anticipated. Darius led Lena to the front of the chamber and turned to address the assembled court. 3 days ago, I granted protection to a woman I believed to be my mate. Tonight, that belief has been confirmed beyond any doubt. Lena has awakened her wolf, and in doing so, she has revealed something that will change everything we thought we knew about the kingdom's history and its future. He paused, letting the tension build. Lena is the last heir of the Silver Moon bloodline. By blood and by right, she is a queen, and as of tonight, she is also my mate, my true mate, bound to me by the blessing of the moon goddess herself. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Several nobles actually looked pale, others exchanged worried glances. And at the back of the room, Lena saw several lords she did not recognize slip out quietly, clearly already planning how to use this information to their advantage. "What about your betrothal to Lady Seraphina?" someone called out. "The council approved that union. Breaking it now would be seen as an insult to the Blackmore family and a violation of political agreements." Darius's expression hardened. The mate bond takes precedence over all political arrangements. This is not negotiable. This is not subject to council approval. This is the will of the moon goddess herself, and any who challenge it, challenge her divine authority. He looked directly at Seraphina as he spoke, and Lena saw him mouth 2 words. "I am sorry." Seraphina straightened her shoulders and stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the chamber. "The Blackmore family acknowledges the mate bond between Alpha King Darius Thornwood and Queen Lena of the Silver Moon line. We release the king from his betrothal obligation and offer our congratulations on his finding his true mate." The graciousness of the gesture clearly surprised many in the room. Lena felt a surge of gratitude toward the woman who had every reason to hate her, but chose dignity instead. Furthermore, Serafina continued, the Blackmore family pledges its support to the restoration of the Silver Moon bloodline and recognizes Queen Lena's rightful claim to her heritage. It was a political masterstroke. By being the first major family to support Lena, Serafina positioned the Blackmores as forward-thinking. Allies rather than bitter enemies. It would not erase the pain of losing what she thought would be hers, but it would preserve her family's power and influence in the new order that was emerging. Other nobles, seeing the way the wind was blowing, quickly added their own pledges of support. Not all of them, Lena noticed. Some remained conspicuously silent, their expressions calculating. But enough voices rose in agreement that the foundation was laid. The Silver Moon Queen had returned, and she had the Alpha King as her mate. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn. There was music and dancing, and elaborate toasts to the newly revealed queen and her mate. Lena moved through it all in a daze, still adjusting to her new reality. She had a wolf. She had a mate. She had royal blood. She had gone from being the lowest of the low to standing at the pinnacle of power in a single night. It should have felt like a dream come true. And in many ways, it did. But she also understood that her new position came with dangers and responsibilities she had never imagined. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? As the sun began to rise, casting golden light through the castle windows, Darius led Lena away from the celebration and back to the private balcony where they had spoken that first night. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pulling her close against his chest. "Overwhelmed," Lena admitted. Terrified, excited, confused, all of those things at once. "That is normal," Darius said, amusement warming his voice. "You have had a rather dramatic week." Lena laughed, a sound that was half sob. "That is one way to put it. I went from running for my life to discovering I am a queen. I still cannot fully believe it is real." "It is real," Darius assured her. "All of it. The wolf, the bloodline, the mate bond. This." He tilted her face up and kissed her properly for the first time since the ritual. And this kiss was different from the desperate one before. This kiss was a promise, a claiming, a declaration that she was his and he was hers, now and forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darius rested his forehead against hers. "We have a long road ahead of us. There will be nobles who resist your claim. There will be political maneuvering and challenges and attempts to drive us apart. But none of it matters, Lena, because we have something stronger than politics or power. We have each other. We have the mate bond. And we have destiny on our side." Lena looked out at the rising sun, at the kingdom spread out below them, at the forest where her wolf had finally awakened. "I was just trying to survive," she said softly. "I just wanted to make it through one more day. I never imagined I would end up here." "You were never just hiding," Darius said, echoing the words he had spoken that first night. "You were waiting for the right moment, waiting to come home, waiting for me to find you." He pulled her close again, and Lena felt her wolf stirring contentedly beneath her skin, purring with satisfaction at being so close to their mate. "You are mine, Lena. You always have been, and I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are exactly where you belong." As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and gold, Lena realized that he was right. She was home, not because of the castle or the title or the power, but because she had finally found the place where she was meant to be, with the wolf inside her that she had carried unknowingly all her life, with the mate who had recognized her when she could not recognize herself, and with a future that was no longer about running and hiding, but about standing tall and claiming everything she had always deserved. The huntress had become the queen. The fugitive had become the mate of the most powerful alpha in the land. And the girl, who thought she had nothing discovered, she had everything. In the distance, wolves began to howl, their voices rising in celebration of the new dawn. And for the first time in her entire life, Lena understood what they were saying. They were singing of destiny fulfilled, of mates united, of a queen returned to her throne. They were singing of her.